Welcome, everybody, to our second of the Airtime series. My name is Preston Holland. I'm a proud GLADA member and the host of this webinar series. Today, we're going to talk about the state of conformity. And I think that we've got a really interesting conversation planned for today's webinar. As a reminder, we do not do boring webinars here. So it is not boring webinar style. We have all of the spicy takes ready for you. And this webinar series is brought to you by GLADA. If you want to learn more about being a GLADA member, go visit the website at glada.aero, A-E-R-O, glada.aero. It is a group of aviation professionals that work together in the transaction space and in the operator space, and we would love to have you join as a member. So today we are talking about conformity, and we have a wide variety of opinions and voices coming on here. First, we have Mike Horan from Taughannock Aviation, and we are really excited to have him. They are new GLADA members. And Mike, welcome to the stage. Welcome to Airtime.
Thanks. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So excited to hear kind of your perspective on the current state of conformity and what you are seeing from an operator level. So if you can just give us a quick overview, background on yourself, kind of how you got here, and we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I'm with Taughannock Aviation out of Ithaca, New York. I've been here for about 20 years now. I started on the flight line as a co-pilot, worked my way up through the management ranks of the company and now to the president's desk. And I've been here in this role since 2012. I've worked for other aviation companies prior to that. We've been around, Taughannock has been around for about 45 years now with the same ownership.
Yeah, very cool. We are excited to hear your perspective. So I wanted to get, the topic of this webinar today is conformity. And we hear from a lot of operators that the state of conformity today can be challenging. So wanted to get just a quick overview, when you're talking about bringing a new aircraft on as far as management goes, putting on a 135 certificate. Can you give us a general overview, specifically in your region of the country, of what conformity is looking like right now?
Yeah, so it's definitely changed from where it once was. There's a lot more red tape, if you will. I think that the fact that the market is so hot, people buying airplanes right now, it's taxing the FSDOs, it's taxing the operators. A lot of people are doing multiple conformities at the same time, which we actually just did, which we've never really done two at once. So that was a learning curve and it was a challenge, but we managed to get through it. But I think that as it seems like the market's starting to slow down a little bit. So hopefully the amount of paperwork will slow down and things can get processed at the federal level a little quicker.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what right now from a barrier standpoint, right? So there's obviously, you have manuals and there's a lot of, there's a lot that goes into conformity.
Sure.
Is it delay of response times? Like what are some of the nitty-gritty big barriers right now?
Yeah, the two biggest barriers that we see are manpower and the sheer volume of the records. The manpower both on the operator side and on the government side. A lot of mechanics don't like to do paperwork, and conformity is a lot of paperwork. So, like we just had two go at the same time, and we were taking mechanics and having them do office work, and they're not used to it, so it slows the process down. There's also still a shortage of qualified A&Ps, both to do your DOM jobs or your quality control jobs and your floor jobs. So that's probably our biggest hurdle. And then on the FSDO level, we just had our principal maintenance inspector and avionics inspector retire within 60 days of each other. So, and there's not a lot of people that are in the wings to sort of fill in those roles. So the FAA, at least in our region, has been pretty short staffed for a while, and now they're even shorter staffed. And it takes a while to get someone into that role, to get them comfortable. Doing a conformity is not like, here's your checkbook, go write a check. You really gotta know what you're doing. The second thing is the volume of the records. Depending on the size and scope of the airplane, how old it is, all of the usual factors. If you get an airplane that's just got horrible records, that could pose a challenge.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when you are getting ready to take a new aircraft on, maybe it's a new aircraft type, something that you haven't seen before.
Yep.
You have an owner call you up and say, "Hey, I'm ready to have cash flow positive on my jet." Right? They say, "Hey, I'm going to charter this out and I'm going to make a ton of money." Right? And after we finally get them past the fact that no, you're not going to, and this is actually going to cost you money. Once you get them to that point, what do most owners like? What are some of the misconceptions that owners have when you first start the conformity process?
Well, their lack of understanding of what it really takes. So they think it's just like you're buying a car and you're getting the insurance put on it and off you go. You can start generating cash flow. That's obviously not the case, right? So what I'd like to do is educate them right out of the gate, whether they're a new aircraft owner, and even if they're a previous aircraft owner, tell them, hey, here's the state of the FAA right now. Here's where our company's at. We've had a cursory look at the records of whatever airplane the particular owner has. This is what the expectations are. This is what our best educated guess of what this is going to take, dollar wise and time wise, and just be open and transparent, and don't try to just give them, paint a big rosy picture that it's going to be done in 2 days, because, you got to be realistic.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. So when you are actually evaluating the aircraft, you take a look at the records. Can you walk us through what that process is like? Because I think that there's a lot of people on the transaction side that say, "Oh yeah, here's an operator. They're good. They're legit. They're going to put it on your certificate." But there's a
Yeah.
lot of steps that go into that. So first call comes in, referral comes in. Like, what's the next steps out of that?
I would hope that we would be involved in the pre-purchase inspection, theoretically, if it's a new airplane that they're acquiring. A lot of the questions that can be answered, as far as, putting your objectives together to add the aircraft to your certificate, can be answered when you're doing the pre-purchase inspection, because you got a lot of time to look at serial numbers and parts on the airplane. You can have a cursory look at the records. You can, look, listen, and feel, if you will. And then it gives you sort of a good picture to put together a realistic and attainable game plan with what the future is going to look like. And you can say, hey, maybe this airplane's not the best for charter because there's a lot of inconsistencies here that are going to cost a lot of money to fix, for example. Or maybe it's an airplane that's, meticulously maintained and you're going to sail through conformity in 60 days.
Yeah. But I think the big differentiator here is it can be 60 days, or it's 60 days is the optimistic timeline.
Yeah, right.
The pessimistic timeline can be a lot further than that.
Yeah. I think in a perfect world, if your records are in pristine shape, if your FSDO's at the ready to look at your conformity submission, 60 days is even then is probably a little unrealistic in today's times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So older aircraft or new aircraft, right? So, or newer aircraft, right? New to you. What's the difference in that conformity process? I mean, obviously you have less logbooks. Does that help at all, or does
Well,
not really matter?
it doesn't really matter. What matters the most is the condition of the records and the accuracy of the records. Have the service bulletins been complied with? Do the serial numbers of the parts match logbook entries? Are all the logbook entries with traceability there? Has the airplane been on a 135 certificate before that might have a conformity manual that was submitted to a previous FSDO that you could use to tailor your own submission to your local FSDO? That matters really more than the age of the aircraft. I've seen older, 20-year-old aircraft come in here that have records that are pristine and absolutely perfect and sail through conformity. And then you have an airplane that's only a few years old that may not have ever been on a 135 certificate, or maybe not a real reputable one, and the records are just a mess, and you just, takes a lot longer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What's one tip that you can give to kind of the advisors? So you have brokers in the picture, you have,
Yep.
all of the different players that are a part of the transaction. What is your suggestion to them? Like, what's a little piece of a little tool? Like when I do aviation finance, for instance, right? I say, here's your three levers that you have to pull on, right? Down payment, interest rate, and amortization. We
Sure.
can play with those, but I give them enough to where they can, walk into the conversation feeling a little more educated. What's one of those pieces of advice that you would give to the transaction folks?
I would tell them, quite honestly, look at the whole picture. Do your homework. Talk to whatever FSDO that the aircraft is going to be in. Talk to the operator. Get sort of a general idea of what's the state of affairs right now. What are things looking at? What do you expect from our client or our customer? What can we put together to make the process seamless? You got to look at. You can't just look at something and say, "Oh, hey, here we go. We're going to put it on the charter. We're going to make all this money that you're not going to really make." You got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, I think that's super. I think that's very important and very helpful. One last question for you: turboprop versus jet engine. Like, I think that there's a perception that, it should be easier to throw this turboprop on a certificate
Now,
versus a jet.
again, it really, an airplane on a certificate is an airplane on a certificate. Unless you're changing the type of certificate you have, maybe you have a single pilot, single aircraft certificate. Maybe you're transitioning to a 10 or more that would require some more work, but it really doesn't matter. Like I said, what matters the most is the condition of the records, the condition of the airplane, and being able to trace everything back as far as you need to go to do your verification.
No, very interesting. Well, Mike, if somebody wants to find out more about Taughannock and what you guys can do for their customers, where's the best place for them to find that?
Sure, you can go right to our website. It's www.flytac.com. It's FLYTAC.com. All of our contact information is right there on our website, as well as a whole bunch of information about our company, our history, and where we've been.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for not making us spell Taughannock in your website. We are all very thankful for that.
No problem.
We're going to ask Mike to stick around for a second. We are going to bring in a kind of unique perspective. This is Tara Adamson and Josh Cooper. They're with Aviation Technical Advisors, they're going to give us kind of a perspective from a national level. But I thought that it would be interesting to kind of get both the operator and advisor perspective on conformity. So Tara and Josh, we want to welcome you guys to Airtime. Uh-oh. I don't know if we've got audio from you guys.
Yes. Yeah.
There we go. We're back. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Mike and I have been discussing here on the show, just talking about kind of the state of conformity for them and what they're seeing kind of in the Northeast, but wanted to also get your perspective on that. One of those last questions, which is, what is one tip that you give to both broker community and to operators, right? Because you're kind of dealing with both sides of the transaction when an aircraft may be moving between operators. What's one piece of advice that you would give to operators when they're trying to conform an aircraft?
Well, I think Mike alluded to it as well, but transparency first and foremost. Brokers, as far as the brokerage side of the house goes, sometimes they employ their own technical team to do these sort of things, see the oversight on the pre-buys and stuff like that. But a lot don't have that team. So I always encourage brokers to reach out to us as advisors and have us come in and manage the oversight of the pre-purchase inspection. Even possibly if you're looking to go on a 135 and you've already identified the operator, have us come in and do the pre-purchase logbook review for them as part of their pre-buy. And what we've done in the past is just take the whatever the operator's GMM checklist for conformity is. Usually it's the AC. And we build the pre-purchase inspection logbook review sort of around their own checklist, so that aircraft comes out of pre-purchase, discrepancies have been resolved. It goes straight to the operator. The operator has a conformity package, both electronically and a hard copy built, and is ready to be submitted to the FAA.
Mike, is that something that you feel like would help accelerate your process?
Enormously.
Yeah.
Enormously, yeah. You want to get as much data as early as possible, especially, like you said, if you're taking a delivery of an aircraft, build the conformity around your pre-purchase inspection, or vice versa, and the more of the conformity you can do during the pre-purchase is really helpful, because I mean a lot of it is duplicated.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So what separates Tara and Josh, maybe talk about this, and Mike maybe as well, is what separates a good operator in this process? Because I think that like the definition of good, right, totally changes depending on what you qualify. I think there's some brokers out there that might think a good operator is someone who promises the highest amount of rev share and they're going to fly the aircraft 800 hours a year. But what qualifies in the conformity process, the kind of the differentiators between a good, well buttoned up, highly qualified operator versus someone who, this may be way more painful than what you bargained for?
Yeah, I think it's just about being honest with your customer, aircraft owner, from the very beginning. We've seen operators, try and offer so much information, and basically, yes, we can get the aircraft conformed in 30, 60 days. But, do they have pilots already? Do they have it, their training scheduled? Do they haven't even have the logbooks ready for the, FISTO to review? So it's just like you see these operators making all these promises, and then you're never going to be able to follow through.
Yeah, that's helpful. Mike, how do you help combat that problem?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing is, do your due diligence on the actual operator. Go in and look at it and say, hey, show me some conformities that you've done before. Show me what systems in place you have to do the conformity. How is your relationship with your FISDO? How electronic are you? Are you still back in the 1980s with paper, or are you all digital? What portion is done remotely versus on site, things like that. Have you had any violations from your FISDO? Have you had airplanes fail a conformity for things that you have missed maybe? All of that would be helpful when you sort of look at, who's a good operator and who's maybe not as good.
That's interesting. Mike,
And
do you find... Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to piggyback on that a little bit too. One important thing that, again, is not all end all be all, but look at the certifications of the operator as well. Are they Wyvern? Are they DOD? Those certifications are not easy certifications to have. And to be a good operator and have those means you really have a functioning manual system to include SMS and all that. So I think operator certificates that they carry also says a lot about the operator. Again, it might not, apply in every case, but it's a good starting point.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I think that this is an important discussion, and to talk about how to identify good operators. Mike, do you ever tell people like, hey, we don't operate that type of aircraft, and so we're just not the right operator? Or is it more of, sure, we'll figure it out? It's got
to be almost like a marriage. It's got to be a good fit. We've turned airplanes down lots of times. It's just not in our wheelhouse. Bigger airplanes, smaller airplanes, or maybe we just don't have the capacity. There's been times in years past where we just didn't have the capacity to add airplanes, and we said, we'd really love to add your airplane, but we really can't give you the type of service that you deserve and expect. So we're going to have to pass on this one.
Nice. No, I think that's really interesting. Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to have Mike back on when we kind of do the roundtable with all the attendees. But Mike, we really appreciate your perspective. Sure. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much.
Yep, sure thing.
Awesome. All right. Again, this is Tara and Josh. They are from Aviation Technical Advisors. One topic that we wanted to talk about was regional FSDOs, one thing that we've talked about a lot, we've talked offline, is the difference between the different FSDOs, and every FSDO has a different unique flavor. So wanted to hear kind of your perspective as you think about it from a national picture of what the different strategies either operators or owners can have when going in to deal with each of these individual FSDOs.
Well, at first you would think, every FSDO would have the same training, and therefore operate the same, which we all know is not accurate. Our primary experience is in the South here, Southeast, mainly with the Atlanta FSDO, very, very easy to work with. As of recently, though, we've worked with FSDOs out in California, Oklahoma, South Carolina, several states, and they're all different in that some FSDOs require you to do it by the book. In other words, you go into their system, you submit an application for conformity, whereas some FSDOs are, like our FSDO, for example, we would just shoot them an email, say, hey, guys, we got a conformity coming, and they'd be on site whenever we told them to. But with the, obviously the manpower issues now, as an example, we were working with an operator in South Carolina that essentially was told by the Atlanta FSDO, which is overseeing their certificate, that they no longer had the bandwidth to drive up to South Carolina. So that operator, for example, is having to come down, fly the aircraft down to Atlanta for the FSDO to physically inspect it. And then, like I said, some FSDOs, to Mike's point earlier, you submit a package, there's just no bandwidth to adequately go through that package. So you're up there in that 60 plus days. But I always encourage, everybody to get in touch, build a relationship with your FSDO, your PAI, your PMI, and try to get, a level of trust and transparency with them, because that'll go a long way and hopefully expedite the conformity process. Again, if they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the bandwidth. But in our case, we felt that I can call them up at pretty much any point in time and say, hey guys, I need a favor or whatnot. So again, every FSDO is different. We've worked with FSDOs that's running 6 months to get a conformity package approved. But beyond that, it's just, like I said, build the relationship with your FSDO and know the guys and girls you're working with.
Yeah. Well, how about self-conformity? I think that that's an issue that somebody I can hear. I can hear somebody who may not be as educated saying, well, what about self-conformity? We don't have to mess with a lot of that. What's your guys' opinion towards self-conformity, and does it expedite the process? Does it not? What's your guys' take on that?
Well, like Josh said, every FSDO is different. Some don't have the bandwidth to be on site, so you might not even have the option to do an on-site conformity. However, our experience that we've had recently, self-conformities are just taking these operators a lot longer. Reason being is you're submitting a package and you're going back and forth through emails of communication, providing documentation through emails, having these phone calls. Whereas, if you're requesting them to be on site, from our experience, is we build the package and we have the GMM checklist, everything that they are requiring that you to have, it's in this physical package. That means you can sit down with the FAA for a day or how long it takes, and you can sit there and go through every single question that they may have and answer it in real time, and provide all the support and documentation, show them the aircraft. Doing all that is also building on that relationship and being transparent with them. And, if they have any discrepancies, you can fix it right there and then. During that process, from our experience, we were able to get an aircraft conformed in a day. Of course, this is after us building the package and scheduling everything with the FAA. But once we got them on site, we would sit there with them as long as it took to go through everything that they needed. When I say being transparent is, go to your IPC, print out the placard inspections, show them that you've done your due diligence, and make sure all the placards are there. Go through the safety equipment, make sure your AFMs are up to date. So it's basically just providing all that information to them right there in real time. It's going to save you so much time and headache going back and forth with all these emails.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the topic of time is something that we talked about with Mike as well, but wanted to get your perspective. Can you give us, and this is for those of us who don't live in this world, we have no idea what this sequential order comes. And so, in your opinion, what is kind of, let's call today, which is Thursday, September 18th, let's call that day 0. And so that's the first time that, that somebody's saying, hey, we're thinking about buying this airplane. We're going to put it on charter. Let's say that's day 0. What has to happen? We have the pre-purchase inspection, which happens, then the transaction that happens. What happens once the aircraft has changed possession and it is moved over into the other management company? What are the next steps immediately following that in order to get an aircraft conformed?
Well, as the operator, I'm assuming you probably know the aircraft is coming to you once it gets through its pre-buy and the aircraft closes. So again, to expedite the logbook review, you could hire somebody like us, or if you have the bandwidth within your company, go to the MRO or go to wherever the aircraft is at with the logbooks, and go ahead and start your conformity checklist while the aircraft's in pre-buy. That's how we would do it. And basically, when it came on, it came to us. We'd get the 91 LOAs for them, and then we would submit our conformity package because we'd already completed it prior to the aircraft even getting to us. But once the aircraft did get to us, like I said, we would do the final inspections, such as the placards and the emergency equipment, stuff like that. But the bulk of the checklist was already done because we had driven or flew out to the aircraft wherever the records were and did that part prior to. We were lucky in the fact that we had the bandwidth. Now that this is all we do, we obviously have the bandwidth. So a lot of operators don't have that, sort of, luckiness, but we do. So again, once the aircraft came to us, I would submit, and the FAA already had a heads up that it was coming. I would submit the application for adding DO85 this aircraft op specs, and then just say, hey, Mr. Fisdo, can you be here on this day? And then they would be there. And typically speaking, I would have the D85 signed on the aircraft before they even left our facility. So just like I said, if you can do that, that's great. But if not, day 0, you're probably looking at 2 weeks to do a great, good thorough review of the records, depending on the age and of the aircraft, obviously. And to your point earlier, old versus new. I mean, we've taken new delivery aircraft and found, things wrong with the manual system. So I would just say, yeah, old versus new does not matter.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So you've talked about a few different times, you've touched on this, but I wanted to address it, head on. Is you've talked a lot about how your role as a consultant complements the DOM. Walk us through the checklist, and how do you guys come in and complement the DOM for a management company? So I would imagine most management companies out there, Mike from earlier may have a bunch of technical experts on his team. He may not have the bandwidth. How do you guys come in and help augment and supplement that team? From a step-by-step, I mean, you handhold the process all the way through the conformity process, but where all do you augment that team?
Yeah, so basically it's like straight from the beginning, it's just working with that DOM or QAM, whoever is basically really running the conformities there at the operator. And we'll take that checklist, we'll go through the checklist with the operator first to make sure that, of course, we're all on the same level of voice required. Speak to them one-on-one about, okay, well, what's your FISTO like? What's their little nitpicky things that they're going to want to ask, because everybody is different. So it's just working with them from the get-go. A lot of these operators that we work with and MROs, they just don't have the bandwidth in-house. And then you're taking away your DOM or QAM inspectors. As Mike said earlier, he's pulling in techs who've never even looked at logbooks before. And you're pulling people off the floor who, should be working on the floor, building revenue for the company that way instead of looking at logbooks. And if they've never done it before, they're going to miss out on things. And then that's going to make your conformity process even longer, because now you're having to explain to the FAA when they're on site, why was this missed? So like I say, yeah, we'll come on site, go through all the logbooks, work with the DOM, but that's us being there is giving these operators an opportunity for their DOMs to focus on what they really should be focusing on.
Yeah, and that really talks to what Mike talked about earlier. Was you're taking these mechanics off of the shop floor into the office, which is a foreign environment to them. They don't like it. They want to be turning wrenches, and so that's usually where there's a lot of tension. The last thing that I want to talk about is your business model, because I think that it's unique in that you are not competing with the operator. You're not necessarily competing with the broker. You're coming in and slotting in. So who typically hires you? Is it the operator saying, hey, Aviation Technical Advisors is going to do this and we're just going to add it to your bill? Is it the broker saying, hey, before you go into pre-buy, you need to talk to these guys? Is it the owner going on Google and saying, help, I can't get my aircraft on my 135 certificate and I'm not making the millions of dollars that my operator promised? Like who is it in the process that usually brings you in, from a referral standpoint?
I would say all of the above, everybody that you've just mentioned. We've worked with many brokers across the US, supporting them with the pre-purchase inspection logbook reviews. We've also helped support them with organizing logbooks and auditing them before they actually go to market the aircraft for sale. That just makes the aircraft look a lot better for anybody that's going to come in and buy the aircraft. MROs, a lot of them don't have the bandwidth for doing the pre-purchase inspection on the logbook side. Maintenance, they can get that wrapped up real quick. When it comes to logbooks, they just don't have the bandwidth in-house. They reach out to us. Owners, just like you said, we offer Part 91 management as well. So they'll come to us for that. And if they're looking to purchase an aircraft, we'll go out there and vet these aircraft and put together a report, showing him, okay, well, which one do we recommend? Basically anything really in aviation, if it's maintenance related, people will come to us for it.
And then obviously on the operator side, that's who's hiring us for conformity, or to help with conformities. In addition to that, we've had operators hire us to write their manuals. We were employed to write a 10 plus seating manual for an operator that was going from 9 or less to 10 or more. And frankly, they just didn't know what was involved with it. So we came in, they hired us to write their camp manual. So we came in and did that. And then we're working with an operator right now that's hired us to get them a Part 125 certificate for a larger aircraft. So we're building that program. So yeah, we do a lot on the operator side as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Last question. We had talked before the webinar, kind of in our pre-call, that this is way less expensive than I think a lot of people would anticipate. I think I know when you told me what the pricing was, I was like, oh, that's incredibly reasonable. And, it feels like you're buying time back. So what does it cost to engage you guys? What does that include? Walk us through kind of that last part of your offering.
Yeah, well, we keep talking about how we're building an honest and transparent company. We're not out there to rip anybody off. We've seen what other companies charge, especially the large MROs. We were just told one price last week by somebody, and we were shocked. So our cost, is based on the size of the aircraft. Of course, yes, if it's an older aircraft, the price will probably increase because you've got more logbooks to go through. However, our cost is generally around the 8,000 to 14,000 for a conformity. And so, yeah, like I said, we're not out there to rip anybody off, and that includes, us coming to you, going through all the logbooks. Generally, we can get this logbook review done if it's a pre-purchase inspection or for conformity. We can generally get it done in 5 days. We've been able to get one done in 3 days before because, of course, it was a much newer aircraft. But yeah, and then, if you want to, we can also then be on site with your FAA inspectors. We're the ones that went through the conformity package, put everything together, so we'll know that aircraft very well. So, we'll come out there and also sit down and like I said, sit with your inspectors, go through it, answer any questions. So hopefully we can speed along this conformity process.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, Tara and Josh, we really appreciate you coming on. Stick around for the roundtable at the end of the webinar. But if somebody wants to engage Aviation Technical Advisors, where can they find out more information about you guys?
Yeah, you can simply just go to our website. It's aviationtechnicaladvisor.com. And then all of our information, all of our background information, you can learn more about us is on there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tara. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks.
All right. The last part of our segment today is James Logue. James Logue wears two different hats. He is the director of maintenance at Latitude 33 Aviation out in California. And he is also the founder of Louge Aviation, which does pre-purchase inspections and a few other technical advisory services for business aviation. So we are going to welcome James up here. James, welcome to Airtime.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So James, we wanted to get into the nitty gritty because you have a very technical hat that you wear currently in kind of both of your careers. So wanted to get from your perspective, from the maintenance perspective, what you when somebody asks you what is conformity. So when I call you and I say, James, I don't understand what this means. Can you explain this for the people like me who are pretty dense and don't 100% understand what conformity is?
Well, in the technical sense, most people look at it as getting the aircraft listed on the DO85. But I think if we zoom out and kind of think about it from a customer perspective, it's getting the aircraft into operation. And there's a litany of different op specs, depending on the aircraft, depending on the operator, that you might need to be able to fully put your aircraft into operation. So while getting the aircraft onto the DO85, this is the major cornerstone of it. Also, people should be thinking about DO95 for the MEL, international operations, extended overwater operations. All those different things kind of come together to represent what I think what the end user, the owner of the aircraft's view of conformity really means. For different aircraft, it can mean different things. If you have aircraft with 10 or more seats, that's going to entail, getting on DO89, DO72. Are you going to have a reliability program as the operator? So all these different things and all these different pieces have to align. So yeah, while getting the package built and getting it on DO85, that's the kind of the lead of it. That won't really matter if you don't have the other items for a specific type of airplane.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So basically, so somebody wants to buy an aircraft. Let's say I know that you and I have both been on transactions before in which a broker calls you and says, hey, we have this aircraft. It's going to go on this 135 certificate. And you kind of put on your Louge Aviation hat. When you're advising on kind of the pre-purchase inspection, what are some of the items? Is there something specific? Like, does a pre-purchase inspection for a 91 only aircraft, does that differ for a pre-purchase inspection for an aircraft that's going to go on 135?
Yes. So, if seating configuration's been changed at any point, if we're talking like super mids, large cabins, they're going to have 10 plus seats, making sure all that was done correctly. CVR, FDR requirements, there's a lot of gotchas with that. Plane is, an older plane, it might be grandfathered in, might not need the 88 parameter FDR if it's kind of past a certain point. You see it a lot on like Challenger 605s.
So for those of us who are still a little slow,
yeah.
walk us through the FDR requirements. What's the age cutoff? How should we be thinking about FDR? What is the FDR? Walk us through that.
Oh, you caught me without my homework being refreshed. I forget the exact cutoff year.
You can give us a ballpark, like around
2010. I want to say. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, aircraft, built and delivered past that age, need to have been equipped with an FDR that records 88 parameters, flight controls, throttle settings, pretty much everything the pilots are doing and the aircraft's doing needs to get recorded.
Is that the black box that a lot of people
the black
like
box? Yeah, that's
okay.
That's actually orange. Yeah,
the orange black box. A black box would be hard to find after a crash, I guess. So making it orange seems a lot more reasonable.
you know, if somebody's looking, you know, at a large cabin, super mid, and there's some sort of manufacturing overlaps in those years, you know, it can be, it's not so much replacing the FDR. A lot of people think, oh, I just need to get a new FDR. It's all the sensors. It's, you know, it's only as good as what it's being told. So on like a 605, for example, if you need to get that done, you know, it can be north of 700 grand by the time you've got, you know, all the wiring mods and new sensors put in and new FDR. So that's something you're going to want to confirm.
Feels like you're going to have a lot of charter hours to make that math make sense, right?
Kind of kills the deal. What most people do in that circumstance is they'll STC the plane down to 9 seats, just to kind of get around that. You know, you won't have a 10-seat airplane, but you'll be able to charter it still with the you know, less than 88 parameter FDR.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, continuing back on that kind of pre-purchase inspection, I derailed us a little bit for the Dunce train, which I am the engineer of. Walk us through kind of the rest of the pre-buy, right? So you have kind of the difference between, oh, an owner called me, they're going to fly at corporate, they're going to fly 250 hours a year, 91, versus this person's going to fly 100 hours a year, and then they're going to charter it as hard as they can in the downtime. What are some of the other differences that they should be considering when thinking about a pre-purchase inspection?
Mostly the equipage, if it's, you know, equipped to be able to do 135. From there, you know, really, I wouldn't say I'm looking at anything any differently between a 91 and a 135 beyond that. And even if I'm doing a 91, people always change their minds and might say, hey, you know, their situation changes and say, hey, now I need that charter revenue. So it's something kind of we always touch on. But yeah, from there, it's pretty standard. You want to make sure that the aircraft's, you know, has all its documentation for any interior refurbs, you know, things like fire blocking and flame certifications. Yeah, and then from there, it's pretty much apples and apples. Is it airworthy? Inspections all caught up. Placards are all there. It's pretty interchangeable between a 91 and 135 once you get past the equipment requirements.
Yeah, interesting. So if you're putting on your DOM hat, what are some of the most overlooked pieces from either a pre-purchase inspection or when you're going into conformity, you're like, oh, wow, someone really overlooked this and it's going to make things a lot more challenging? What are some of the top things that people miss?
You see a lot, and it's mostly the way kind of some manufacturers do things, and they'll build a plane with 2 HFs. They'll take it off the assembly line, but then, you know, having 2 HFs was an option, and maybe that got redlined out, so they'll remove the HF, you know, the second HF. You go to do conformity, and it looks like in the camp package that you get Rev 1 of that it's in there, and then you go out to the aircraft and it's not there in reality, and nobody ever went back and updated camp. Yeah, the biggest gotchas are just making sure that the aircraft in physical matches up with the aircraft in documentation.
Interesting. Other than camp, are there any other digital tools that you use in your role day to day that kind of make your job easier, or that might make the conformity process easier between maybe you're transferring, right? Maybe you have an owner that's selling their airplane, they're going to buy a new one. Are there any other tools that you're helping kind of make that aircraft a little bit easier to conform for the next person?
Regardless of what the tool is, I generally kind of like soda. I call everything Coke. But yeah, there's Pepsis and there's Sprites. But yeah, like Traxall, you know, any of the maintenance trackings, they all have document uploads. And if you really want to go the extra mile, a system like Bluetail would be helpful. But really just making sure that all the necessary records, the things I know the FISO's going to want to see, which is like the 91, 411, 413 for your pedostatic system inspections that you got to do every 2 years. Making sure there's a clean, easy to access digital copy of that. Weight and balance, last time the aircraft was weighed in the past 36 months. Making sure there's a clean digital copy of that exists in there. And just going through and just making sure that, you know, everything that should be there is there and easily accessible and kind of in logical order.
Interesting. So I've asked everybody this question, and I'm going to close out our segment here together before we go into the roundtable with the same question. If you had one thing that you could tell a broker or an owner that they have either confused or that they're not thinking about or something like that when it comes to conformity? What is that one thing that you would really try and drive home as a little snippet for them to be better equipped?
I've seen some operators tell prospective incoming clients, "Oh, we have self-conformity," and that has its limits, and it's kind of a la carte. Some FSDOs want to see every plane. Some PMIs at the FSDO want to see every plane that comes in. Some establish a rapport relationship with the owner, and they have other make and model. So they're adding a CJ3, and they already have 10 of them. So it's kind of low risk in the PMI's eyes. They're mostly doing a paperwork review, and that's kind of it. But if they have a new aircraft type, that's going to change it. There is no real self-conformity for that. They're going to have to go through the whole process no matter what, or at least they should. And I think there's just a lot of confusion around what that means, what self-conformity really means these days. But I would like to see that make a little clearer. People be a little bit more upfront about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think the self-conformity issue is a hot topic. So, James, thanks so much. I'm going to welcome everybody back out to the stage, into our little virtual stage here. So, welcome everybody else back. I have a couple of just quick closing questions. One, and just raise your hand if you want to answer it, if you have a quick answer. But if you had a wish list for how to improve the conformity process, whether that's on the FAA side or it's on the owner and broker side, if you had a wish list, what would be on that wish list? And you cannot answer that the FAA doesn't care to actually inspect, right? They assume they still have to do their job. But what other things on that wish list would you have?
I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah, let's go.
The biggest thing would be have all of the FSDOs around the country process and review conformities in the exact same way. Have it be, it is technically standardized, but there are different ways to interpret different things. And, in a perfect world, having everybody think and act the same way and look at the records and understand them in the same way, I think for an industry, it would be helpful. That would be my number one. That would be my number one wish list item, just like with training programs on the flight operations side.
Yeah, that's a good one. James, Josh, Tara, anybody else have an item on their wish list that Mike didn't already cover?
I would agree with Mike, because that would make our job a lot easier if everybody was doing the same thing instead of changing the checklist for every single place that we go. But yeah, so I would agree with Mike.
Awesome. No, very good. James, do you have anything else on your wish list?
No, I kind of similar sentiments there. I just think it's funny. Was talking about this with PMI I work with a lot, and he said it's one of those things. I'll run my FA the way I want to, and they run their FA the way they want to, and someone else runs it a different way. So it's kind of I would like to see, like I said, some uniformity across the process.
The other thing too is you may have two differing opinions within the same FSDO. You might have a principal maintenance inspector this year that has you do things a certain way, and then he or she retires or gets reassigned to other certificates. You get somebody new and they want things done completely differently, which, probably slows the process down.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, that would be, I can imagine that to be incredibly frustrating. That
it is.
It's a moving target, and it's like, do we have Steve or Bob who's in the office today? And what are they going to care about, right? Even at the same FSDO, I can totally understand that. Well, we are nearing the end of our webinar. So Mike, Tara, Josh, James, thank you guys so much for giving perspective here. This has been fantastic. I guess, James, I didn't give you a chance to plug your stuff. So I gave everybody else a chance. So we'll give James a chance to plug his sites, and we'll let Mike and Tara and Josh go. And then I'll wrap us up. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Josh, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Preston.
All right, James. I didn't give you a fair chance to give yourself a good
thank
plug.
you.
So let's hear it.
So I'm James Logue. I run Louge Aviation. We do pre-purchase inspection support, technical consulting, kind of real niche kind of items. We don't really get too into manual writing or anything like that, more high level or type stuff. And then our bread and butter is kind of, pre-purchase support and helping people make sure that they get a solid, reliable airplane for themselves.
And I will say, as someone who has seen some of James's reports, he does a fantastic job. So that's a free plug for you. James, thanks so much for coming on Airtime. We are looking forward to the next time. Hopefully it's that we've announced that there's some sort of, regulation on conformity and everybody feels better about it. So we'll see.
Let's hope.
Awesome. Thanks, James.
All right. Thanks.
I just muted myself. This has been Airtime, which is brought to you by GLADA. GLADA is at glada.aero. Here's my chance to plug myself because I do this as a volunteer job. This is my company, Prestige Aircraft Finance. We provide financing solutions for aircraft owners and for operators. Find us at prestigefinance.com. I also write a blog every week called The Private Jet Insider. You can find that at prestonholland.com. Follow me on social media because you will see all of the spicier takes there at all my social media accounts. And for the next Airtime, we will have it next quarter. I'm not 100% sure what we are going to cover. So we want to hear from you, the listeners, what we should cover. This was born out of a request from the last one. They wanted to hear about conformity. So we said, okay, we'll bring some experts together and talk about conformity. Well, next time we are going to talk about another topic that is important to the aviation industry, to owners, buyers, sellers, operators, and all the rest of the ecosystem around business aviation. Until the next one, we would appreciate you share this with a friend, leave us a comment, and we will see you on the next episode of Airtime. Thanks for coming. All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for coming on, Mike.